The market, I've learned through scars and silence, is not a battlefield where the loudest or fastest win. It's a waiting game, a test of internal fortitude against the relentless, insidious pressure to do something. When I hear the old wisdom, 90% of traders lose because they trade when there's no setup, it's not just a statistic. It's the echo of my own past failures, a confession I've made countless times in the lonely hours after the market closed. It speaks to the fundamental psychological flaw that cripples most of us: the inability to embrace strategic inaction. My journey through the market's brutal education taught me that the greatest enemy was never the price chart, nor the news, nor the hidden hand of institutions. It was the frantic, desperate voice inside my own head, whispering temptations, urging me to act when clarity was absent. I knew, deep down, the setup wasn't there. My charts screamed uncertainty. My rules whispered, stay out. Yet, the silence of the market, the feeling of being sidelined while others seemingly profited, it was a torment I often couldn't bear. The fear of missing out, the gnawing anxiety that every tick was an opportunity slipping through my fingers, became a louder, more compelling narrative than any objective analysis. I traded not because logic demanded it, but because my ego demanded action, demanded to be in the game. This was the core error: succumbing to the emotional need for engagement over the disciplined requirement for a clear advantage. The tension within me was always between the rational understanding that patience was key and the visceral, almost primal urge to simply do something, to prove I was capable, to alleviate the discomfort of waiting. The price paid for this internal conflict was devastating, far beyond mere monetary losses. Each impulsive trade, each entry without a clear setup, was a slow erosion of trust in myself. I watched capital bleed away, not in spectacular crashes, but in 1,000 small, self-inflicted wounds. The cycle was cruel: hope, followed by an ill-conceived action, then the bitter taste of regret, leading to a deeper, more entrenched pattern of self-sabotage. I was chasing something that wasn't there, a phantom opportunity, a fleeting thrill. The market, in its cold indifference, simply took my money, yes, but more profoundly, it took my peace, my confidence, my belief in my own judgment. The realization arrived, not in a flash, but through persistent, quiet suffering. I saw the pattern. The 90% statistic was not some abstract truth for others. It was my own reflection. I was part of it. I was the one trading when no clear setup existed. I was the one inventing reasons to enter, to justify the urge. My mind became a master of rationalization, crafting elaborate narratives around flimsy signals. Each trade was a desperate plea for validation, a gamble against my own better sense. I began to understand the true nature of patience. It was not merely waiting. It was active restraint. It was the conscious decision to override instinct, to sit on my hands, to watch the chaos unfold without participating. This felt unnatural. It felt like weakness, like surrender. But the alternative, I knew, was certain destruction. The market reveals character. It strips away pretenses. It exposes the raw nerves of fear and greed. My fear was not of losing money, not primarily. It was the fear of being irrelevant, the fear of missing out on the big move, the fear of not being smart enough, fast enough, audacious enough. This fear drove me into positions I should have avoided. It pushed me to chase prices that had already moved. It compelled me to act out of desperation, not conviction. Jesse Livermore spoke of setups. He understood the market's pulse. He knew when to act, and, crucially, when to stand aside. That ability, that quiet discipline, felt light years away from my own frantic existence. My charts often showed noise, indecision, a battle between buyers and sellers that offered no clear edge. But I would force a narrative. I would project my hopes onto the candlesticks. I would convince myself that this time was different. It rarely was. The market does not owe me a setup. It owes me nothing. This simple truth was a hard pill to swallow. I felt entitled to opportunities, entitled to profit. This sense of entitlement, born of ego and impatience, was a poison. It blinded me to the obvious. It made me believe I could bend the market to my will. A fool's errand, a costly delusion. I had to reframe my entire approach. Trading was no longer about constant engagement. It became about preservation. Preservation of capital. Preservation of mental energy. Preservation of my edge. An edge only exists when the conditions are clear, when the probability leans heavily in my favor. Anything less is speculation. Blind gambling. The transition was agonizing. It meant confronting the discomfort of inactivity, the whispers of doubt, the nagging feeling that I was falling behind. I learned to distinguish between true opportunity and the psychological pressure to trade. The difference was stark. True setups presented themselves with clarity, almost demanding attention. The others, the ones I used to chase, were born of internal agitation. My greatest victories in the market were not the trades I made. They were the trades I didn't make. The countless times I recognized the absence of a setup. The moments I chose silence over action. This was the true strength. This was the discipline Livermore knew. It was a silent battle, fought daily, within the confines of my own mind. I began to see the market not as a constant stream of opportunities, but as a vast, indifferent ocean. Most of the time, the waters were choppy, unpredictable. My job was not to sail into every storm. My job was to wait for the calm, for the clear currents, for the undeniable path. This waiting was not passive. It was active observation, learning, honing my perception. The cost of trading without a setup is not just the money lost. It is the erosion of trust in oneself. It is the insidious belief that one must always be doing something to be productive. This is a lie. True productivity in the market often means doing nothing. It means waiting for the moment of undeniable clarity, for the market to reveal its hand, for the setup to perfectly align. Only then, with calm precision, does one act. This is the confession. This is the hard-won truth. The market rewards patience. It punishes impatience relentlessly. The market rewards patience. It punishes impatience relentlessly. This truth, once a theoretical concept, became the bedrock of my trading existence. The shift was not immediate. It was a grinding, internal war against years of ingrained habits. The urge to click, to participate, remained a powerful adversary. I would sit before my screens, charts flickering, and feel the familiar tension build. The market would churn, offering hints of movement, small trends that, in my old mindset, would have been enough. Now, I saw them for what they were: traps, distractions, opportunities for the undisciplined to bleed capital. The pain of inaction was real. It felt like watching a train leave the station, convinced it was heading for a fortune, while I remained stranded on the platform. The fear of missing out, FOMO, was a beast I had to tame daily. It whispered doubts. What if this is the one? What if everyone else is getting rich while you sit here, doing nothing? I learned to recognize that voice. It was the voice of my ego, desperate for validation, terrified of being wrong, more terrified of being absent. I had to silence it. Not through force, but through a deeper conviction that my process, my rules, would ultimately serve me better than any fleeting impulse. I began to understand that the market's greatest gift is often its silence. Those periods of consolidation, of range-bound movement, of apparent indecision. These were not dead zones. They were incubation periods. They were the market preparing its next move, revealing its hand. If only I had the clarity to see it. My task was to observe, not to interfere. To let the market build its story, rather than trying to write it myself. This required a profound reorientation of my perspective. I stopped trying to predict. I started reacting, but only to undeniable evidence. The concept of a setup transformed from a vague idea into a precise, almost sacred requirement. It wasn't just a pattern on a chart. It was a confluence of factors: price action, volume, market structure, time frame alignment. Each element had to fit, like pieces of a complex puzzle. If even one piece was missing, the picture was incomplete. The edge was compromised. I learned to walk away, to close the charts, to find something else to do, to allow myself the mental space to detach. This detachment was crucial. It broke the spell of constant engagement, the illusion that I needed to be glued to the screen to succeed. My trading journal became a confessional, not just a record of trades. I meticulously documented not only my entries and exits, but the emotional state preceding each decision. I began to see a clear correlation. Entries made out of boredom, frustration, or fear consistently led to losses. Entries made from a place of calm observation, where the setup presented itself almost effortlessly, often led to profitable outcomes. The market was a mirror, reflecting my internal state back to me. If I was chaotic, my trading was chaotic. If I was disciplined, my trading reflected that discipline. This journey was not about finding a magical indicator or a secret strategy. It was about internal alchemy. It was about transforming my relationship with uncertainty. The market is inherently uncertain. My old self fought against this, trying to impose order where there was none. My new self embraced it. I understood that my job was not to eliminate uncertainty, but to identify moments where the odds were tilted sufficiently in my favor to justify action. And those moments were rare, far rarer than my ego wanted to admit. The fear of missing out began to recede, replaced by a different kind of fear. The fear of trading without a setup. The fear of self-sabotage. The fear of squandering the hard-won lessons. This new fear was constructive. It acted as a guardrail, keeping me from straying into reckless behavior. It was the voice of wisdom, not panic. It reminded me of the bleeding capital, the eroded trust, the bitter taste of regret. It reminded me of the 90% I developed a profound respect for the waiting. It wasn't passive, it was active. It was the most important part of my trading day. During these periods, I refined my understanding, reviewed my rules, analyzed past mistakes, and prepared mentally for the next genuine opportunity. I learned that patience was not a virtue to be admired, but a critical skill to be honed. It was the ultimate leverage. It allowed me to preserve capital, conserve mental energy, and strike with precision only when the market truly offered an invitation. This discipline became my shield, my sword. It was the difference between being a victim of the market's whims and becoming a deliberate participant. The deliberate participant does not chase. He observes, he waits. My days at the screen transformed. No longer were they a frantic sprint to find an entry, but a meditative vigil. I learned to sit with the emptiness of an unmoving chart, to feel the quiet hum of the market without the desperate need to translate it into action. This stillness was not idleness. It was profound engagement, a deep listening to the market's subtle language. I sought not to impose my will, but to understand its existing narrative. The market, I realized, was always speaking, but only to those patient enough to truly hear. It whispered its intentions, but never shouted. My previous self had been deafened by its own internal clamor. The clarity that eventually emerged from this disciplined waiting was startling. When a setup finally presented itself, it was unmistakable. It didn't require me to squint, to rationalize, or to force a narrative. It simply was the confluence of factors aligned with a quiet authority, a natural harmony that resonated with my honed understanding. These were the moments Livermore spoke of, the undeniable invitations, and in those moments, action felt effortless, almost preordained. There was no hesitation, no internal conflict, only a calm, precise execution. The trade was not an act of gambling, but a natural consequence of diligent observation and unwavering patience. This shift brought a profound sense of liberation. The constant pressure to perform, to justify my presence, to make money today, began to dissipate. My focus narrowed to a singular, powerful objective. Act only when the edge is clear, quantifiable, and robust. Anything else was a distraction, a waste of precious capital, and even more precious mental energy. I understood that my true capital was not just the money in my account, but my capacity for disciplined thought, my emotional resilience. To squander these on ill-conceived trades was the greatest loss imaginable. The market tested this newfound resolve daily. There were days, weeks even, where no true setup appeared. The old demons would stir. The whispers of FOMO would return, insidious and tempting. Others are trading. They'd hiss, "You're missing out, you're falling behind." But I had built a new foundation. I had witnessed the destructive power of those whispers. I had felt the bitter sting of regret countless times. Now I met those internal pressures with a quiet strength, a knowing glance at the empty charts, and a firm, internal no. My commitment to my process became absolute. It was my only true advantage in a world designed to exploit impatience. I began to see the market as a series of probabilities, not certainties. My job was not to predict the future, but to identify scenarios where the odds were heavily skewed in my favor, and then to act decisively within those parameters. This meant accepting that many days would yield no opportunities. It meant embracing the mundane, the quiet, the seemingly unproductive stretches. It meant understanding that true productivity in trading was often found in the absence of action, in the rigorous self-governance that allowed me to preserve my resources for when they truly mattered. This transformation extended beyond my trading. The discipline required to wait, to observe, to resist impulse, began to permeate other areas of my life. I found myself approaching decisions with greater deliberation, less emotional urgency. The lessons learned in the crucible of the market became a framework for living. Patience was not just a trading virtue, it was a life philosophy. The ability to distinguish between genuine opportunity and mere noise became a skill applicable to every significant choice. The solitude of this disciplined approach was immense. It was a path few understood, even fewer chose. Most traders remained trapped in the cycle of constant action, driven by the same internal demons I had fought. They saw my inactivity as weakness, my patience as a lack of aggression. But I knew the truth. My strength lay not in constant engagement, but in strategic disengagement. In the power of the no, in the unwavering commitment to my own carefully defined conditions. I stopped seeking external validation. The market's approval, the fleeting thrill of a quick win, no longer held sway. My validation came from within, from adhering to my rules, from executing my process flawlessly, from the quiet confidence that grew with each disciplined decision, each trade not taken. The monetary gains, when they came, were a byproduct, a natural consequence of this internal mastery, not the primary objective. The real profit was the peace of mind, the clarity, the self-respect earned through unwavering self-control. The wisdom of Livermore echoed louder now, not as an admonishment, but as a shared understanding. He knew the internal war. He understood the insidious nature of impatience. His insights were not about market secrets, but about human nature itself, about the eternal struggle to master oneself in the face of relentless temptation. The 90% who lose, they are simply losing the battle within. They are trading their internal peace for fleeting, ill-conceived action. I had been one of them. Now I was learning to win that internal battle, one patient, deliberate decision at a time. The market, in its brutal honesty, had forced me to confront myself. And in that confrontation, I found not just a better way to trade, but a better way to be. The shift was profound. My account, once a battlefield of emotional skirmishes, began to stabilize. The jagged peaks and valleys of impulsive trading smoothed into a more predictable, upward trajectory. This was not about getting rich quickly. It was about sustainable growth, built on the bedrock of self-control. Each profitable trade now felt less like a lucky gamble and more like a justified reward for disciplined waiting. The losses, when they occurred, were small, controlled, and devoid of the agonizing regret that once accompanied every misstep. They were simply the cost of doing business, accepted with an almost detached objectivity, because I knew they were part of a larger, well-defined probabilistic game, not a failure of character. The market no longer felt like an adversary. It became a partner, revealing its opportunities to those who respected its rhythms. My relationship with it transformed from a desperate struggle into a patient, respectful dialogue. This was the ultimate freedom, the freedom from my own internal chaos. The market had taught me the most valuable lesson of all. True success is not found in conquering the external world, but in mastering the internal one. It is a continuous practice, a daily commitment to silence the noise, to resist the urge, to wait for clarity. This patience, this quiet strength, became my unwavering compass. And so, the frantic chase ceased. The market, once a source of torment, became a profound teacher. Its lessons etched not just in my capital, but in my very being. The constant internal struggle, the desperate need to do something, finally quieted. What remained was a calm vigilance, an understanding that true power lay in selective inaction, in honoring the deep wisdom that only presents itself when the conditions are undeniably clear. I no longer fought the market. I danced with its rhythms, stepping in only when invited, with a quiet confidence born of disciplined waiting. This transformation wasn't a destination, but a continuous practice. Each day presented new opportunities for impatience, new whispers of doubt, new temptations to stray. But the scars of the past, the vivid memory of capital bled away by impulsive decisions, served as an enduring reminder. The 90% who lose were not just a statistic. They were the ghost of my former self, a cautionary tale I carried within. Their failure was my lesson, their impatience my warning. I learned that the greatest battle was never against the charts or the news, but against the clamor within my own mind. Winning that battle meant choosing clarity over chaos, conviction over impulse. Ultimately, the market became a mirror, reflecting my internal state. When I was disciplined, patient, and clear, my results followed suit. When I allowed fear or greed to dictate action, the market, with its indifferent efficiency, exacted its toll. This was the profound, brutal honesty of it all. The setups Livermore spoke of were not just technical patterns. They were psychological states, moments when internal and external alignment created an undeniable edge. To wait for them to cultivate that internal stillness was the highest form of mastery. Therefore, if you find yourself in that frantic chase, lost in the noise, succumbing to the urge to act when no true setup exists, know that there is another path. It is a path of quiet strength, of profound patience, of relentless self-discipline. It is the path where true profit lies, not just in wealth, but in peace of mind, in self-respect. This journey is solitary, but it is real. If this truth resonates with you, if it stirs a recognition within your own trading soul, share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us build a community of disciplined minds. Like this message, if it speaks to your experience, and subscribe for more insights into the unvarnished realities of the market. This is not just about trading. It is about mastering the most challenging market of all, yourself.